and best-selling author of Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety, Raising Happy, Healthy Humans ages 8 to 24, and the Available Parent. Expert advice for raising successful and resilient teens and tweens. He'll be speaking to us about the unprecedented challenges our kids and teens are facing today with unlimited social media access, social isolation, and academic pressures. After our meeting, he will be conducting a workshop for professionals at noon today and a presentation for parents tonight at 7 p.m. through the Glenn Bard Parent Series. Dr. Duffy, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Andrew. I'm not sure if you guys can see me. I'm going to go on the likelihood that you can. I'm so glad, Jordan, that you had people introduce themselves. I'm so grateful to be talking to DuPage PLT, and some of my heroes are on this call. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we'll look at this as a collaborative effort and reminders of things we already know. And hopefully I lend a little new information just based on a strictly clinical point of view. So we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to kind of speed talk through some points. And I don't know that we'll have time for Q&A, but I will later today if anybody has the opportunity to join us. I'm really grateful that you're all here with me today. It's important that we are here today. I think we all know this. I've been doing my job for 25 years. I am a clinical psychologist in private practice. I work with teens, tweens, and their families. And over the course of that time, and I know a lot of you have been working just that long with just that demographic. Over that time, I've been worried about kids from time to time, specific kids, individual people. These days, past 3-4 years, I'm worried collectively about all our kids. Like this big giant book back here, Age of Anxiety. This is something I take very, very seriously. I think we are entering this really, really difficult, trying new age of anxiety. I think it's going to be tricky to get our way through them. My wife would tell you I work way, way too many clinical hours. She would have said that before the pandemic. So at the very least, I'm fortunate enough to know what's on the minds of kids today. So I'm going to share a little bit of that and how we're helping them and how we might be unwittingly getting in their way in some ways. So I'll work through these things pretty briefly. And then, hopefully you get something out of it here. I was on a book tour a year ago, and I spent a lot of that tour talking about all of the things that had come up in kids' lives in the past 10 years since I wrote my first book, The Available Parent, until last year or late 2019 when I published this book. So I was talking about vaping and juuling. I was talking about the keen awareness that kids have of mental disorders, how sticky they are for them, how identifying they are for them, how much access they have to all the medications affiliated with each of these disorders. I've been talking about social media and how it plays this enormous impact on the self-worth and the self-esteem of our kids. I've been talking about how academic pressures and social pressures have skyrocketed in the past 5 years or so. I've been talking about the alarming uptick in suicidal thinking and ideation and actual suicides, completed suicides that we're seeing in our kids. And there's a degree of hopelessness that I'm seeing and a whole host of other things. To kind of synopsize what I'm seeing, in the past couple of years, I've been getting about 4 or 5 urgent calls every morning. This morning, my phone is face down because I know I'm getting some right now, but I've gotten about 6 of them. So I don't know what's going on today, but there's something going on today that has people alarmed. If we were talking 5 years ago, I would have gotten 1, 2, maybe 3 of these calls in a rough month. So something dramatic is shifting in the lives and the minds of our teenagers. And it's really important that we, in particular, are keenly aware of what those are. And the things I'm telling you about, I was talking about a year ago, pre-pandemic. So we'll get to what the number the pandemic is playing on these kids. But first, let's talk about what's been going on. And I'll warn you ahead of time that some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here might not be altogether pleasant to hear. I don't think that many of you are going to be very surprised at what I have to say, but I'm going to tell you a couple quick clinical stories with nod to the confidence and HIPAA. But the first person I want to introduce you to, I'm going to call him Tim. This is not his real name, as you might guess. Tim is 18 years old. I've been working with him for 2 years. And I want to tell you that he is a really bright kid. He is likable, charismatic, an athlete, kind of the kid that seems to have it all. Here are some of Tim's complaints coming into me 2 years ago. He could not imagine success in his life. So this kid has a 3.3 or 3.4 GPA. He has a 29 on the ACT, and he can't picture creating the life for his family that he has for himself now, one day. He does not think that he's going to get into college of any kind with those kind of scores. And when he looks at his parents and sees what adulting looks like, it doesn't hold a great deal of appeal to him. So there's a number of problems in there, right? He cannot picture success. He doesn't know what it looks like, and he thinks about it all the time. So think about whether you guys, when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, ever even thought about this stuff. Because I will tell you that if I did, it was strictly in a fantastical way. It wasn't about like, will this really work out? I think we all assumed it would and didn't really think about it. But now, because kids have access to all the things in their hand all the time, that creates some problems. That creates this level of awareness and scope that kids didn't have when we were growing up. And that might be a good thing in some ways. That might create some degree of empathy. But developmentally, we all know that kids aren't prepared for everything they're confronted with. And that creates emotional difficulties. Tim doesn't feel people care for him, despite the fact that he's likable and charismatic. He thinks he is a burden to his friends, but most particularly to his parents. So he has this crippling social anxiety where he has to decide, am I going to be out with friends? Should I opt out of the thing? And he opts out an awful lot of the time because of social anxiety, but he has Instagram and Snapchat in the palm of his hand, so he can see what's going on. He can see what he's missing. And I think we all know that that plays a huge number on the self-esteem of our kids. This is where it gets a little tough. Tim watches porn every single day. A lot of our boys, we all know, watch porn every single day. And it starts in a more innocuous way. He stumbles upon Pornhub or another site, but he continues watching. He's a precocious boy. And eventually he ends up on the dark web looking at pornography that none of us would want any of our kids or ourselves, for that matter, to see. As a result, Tim questions his sexuality. Am I straight? Am I gay? Am I bisexual? Because he's not aroused now in the same way that he was when he first started watching porn. So this creates enormous confusion in kids, and yet it's something that they're doing in silence an awful lot of the time when we think they're looking at a YouTube video or playing a game. He's afraid that once he's with a girl, that he is never going to have a normal sex life, that he has ruined his opportunity to have a normal relationship. This plagues him. So Tim smokes weed every single day, as do virtually all of his friends. And I know there's a Matt Quinn and a few other people out there who are nodding and saying, I know this guy, you know, might not specifically know this guy, but you're familiar with this presentation, right? He really truly believes he cannot make it through the day without it. So he smokes at the beginning, or he takes a little nibble off of an edible before he hits a Zoom class or heads off to school. He will sneak out to hit a vape pen in the middle of the day. He believes he cannot function during the day. He cannot sleep without smoking weed. He is addicted to weed in every very sense of the word. He does not smoke to get high. He literally smokes to get by in his life and believes he can't get by without it. And most importantly, and most urgently, Tim doesn't think much of himself. He doesn't value his life. He feels worthless. He doesn't feel like he's accomplished a whole lot in his 18 years, which is something else most of us weren't thinking about when we were 16, 17, 18 years old, right? But he does. And so he has what I call passive suicidality. In other words, he has no intent of ever hurting himself, but he will say to me, Dr. Duffy, if I get hit by a bus walking out of here today, or if I don't wake up tomorrow, that might be the best thing for everybody. So he doesn't care whether he lives or whether he dies. And I see this, guys, in young people more and more and more with each passing week, I want to say, but it's been like the past few years, passive suicidality. I don't really care. I don't really care if I live or die. And so to find motivation underneath that is so difficult. Tim, by the way, told his parents he wanted to go to therapy because of his grades. He couldn't care less about his grades. Last thing on his mind, it was just his way into the room, and hardly ever is the presenting issue that parents bring to me the actual issue. It might be an artifact of the issue, a symptom of the issue, right? He's not motivated. He's not respectful. He doesn't do his work, but that's a symptom of much deeper set of problems like I'm describing. And that's the reason that I wrote this latest book, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. I'm not pitching it to you, but I would recommend looking at the table of contents on Amazon just to get a feel for what's on the minds of kids today. Because so much of the lives of our kids takes place in the shadows. And we kind of know this, right? They're up alone in their rooms, or they're listening to their AirPods, or looking at a screen, but they're not engaged, right? They're engaged in whatever that is, but we have precious little insight into what that is, what that's about for them, what meaning that all holds for them, and the burden that they are kind of consistently carrying around. Now, Tim's story, by the way, might seem like I cherry picked it, like Duffy went and picked the worst story in his entire caseload to present to us this morning. I promise you I did not. You probably know I work with a lot of Tims, and the kids that you know you work with, that you parent, probably have a great deal of Tim in them. People have asked me, in speaking about this book in particular, and that phrase, the age of anxiety, what I'm talking about there. You know, like, am I talking about that diagnosable anxiety, those panic attacks, school refusal, social phobia, all that stuff? Yeah, I suppose so. But really, what I'm trying to get at is what all our kids are going through right now. We are all idling on high in an age of anxiety pre-pandemic that creates difficulties in our lives. And it starts young, you guys. What they're carrying around on their emotional plates starts as early as 7 or 8 or 9 years old, in part because of access and developmentally. Once again, our kids are not ready for this stuff, but it is in their lives. And so we cannot deny it, and we can't ignore having talks with kids about all the difficult things from very, very young ages. I think most of you know that, but just as by way of reminder, this is a reality. And I want you to know, I've been working with Tims long before COVID. People have asked me, like, this guy you're describing, this is like, you know, this is about this past year. This is about 2020. No, not really. That's not really the problem. So briefly, let me introduce you to somebody else I work with, just to illustrate what's going on in the past 11 months or so. So I work with a girl, we'll call her Shannon, not her real name, not her identifying information. I'm going to spare us that. But Shannon, I met in April of last year. So let's say we were just kind of getting going on the quarantine part of the pandemic. So things were just getting really rough. And let me tell you a little bit about how Shannon presented. She missed her friends desperately. And in the few times that she would get together with her friends at a distance, she realized, oh, I have social anxiety. I've never had that before. This practice effect that I have every single day of connecting with my friends, I do not have that right now. And that alarms her and concerns her. She sincerely fears the pandemic is not going to end. And she uses as her evidence that, hey, we told her at the end of the second semester last year that, hey, this is just going to last a few weeks. And then by the end of the semester, this isn't going to last much longer. This past semester, this coming semester, a lot of these kids do not believe this thing's going to end, that anything is ever going to feel normal again. And I'm hearing this every single day from a lot of kids. Shannon's parents are really cautious about the pandemic. And so she doesn't go out very often. And when she does, it's very, very careful. So what she sees is her friends moving on from her. And she will show me Snapchat stories that suggest that that's true. So that worries her that, like on the back end of all of this, if there is a back end of all of this, I'm going to be alone. And she sincerely believes this. She does go out on occasion, and she does go to school a couple days a week, but it all feels kind of joyless and disconnected and alien to her. She described to me recently being in the hallway and how very odd it was to be single file at 16 years old, masked, so you can't see anybody's facial expressions, 6 feet apart to 8 feet apart, actually, from the people in front of her, the people behind her. And she slowed down just for a moment to say hi to a friend and got detention. And she just feels like this is such a strange world, and she's having a very, very difficult time acclimating to it. It usually comes out in negative emotion toward her family, if nothing else. Shannon has asthma. And so more so than most kids, she's afraid she's going to contract this thing, and that is going to kill her. She also is worried about family members. Her grandmother lives with her family, so she's worried about making her sick and her grandfather. These are things that are actually on the minds of kids that not every parent believes is on the minds of kids. For the first time in her life, Shannon is desperately lonely. What she misses most, and this kind of surprised me and surprised her a little bit, was hugging people. She said, I'm used to touching people. I hug 20 people in the morning on a normal day. I don't touch anybody. And something about that makes me feel like I'm just wilting. I miss that desperately. And she thinks her entire cohort is missing the same. She is concerned about the political disagreements that she has with her boyfriend. She is concerned about the political unrest we've seen lately, including what happened at the Capitol a few weeks ago. And then she'll look at news on TikTok or subreddits or information on the dark web that supports this idea that we're heading towards something awful, possibly a civil war. And a lot of kids are glomming onto this idea that, hey, this is all the beginning and things are about to get really, really, really awful. In short, Shannon is running into a sense of desperation and anxiety and depression she never thought she'd feel. She is the rah-rah cheerleader of her group, and she prides herself on only having taken aspirin and an inhaler in her entire life until now. Now she's on 3 different psychotropic medications to manage and regulate her mood since April. And she still feels like her sanity is slowly slipping away. And I promise you, I am not cherry picking Shannon's story either. You probably know a lot of Shannons. I know a lot of Shannons. Maybe not every element of what I'm telling you here, but a lot of this probably resonates as things that kids are struggling with. So this pandemic, as it turns out, is this toxic brew of anxiety where we're idling really high as a household. It's happening to us. We're affected. Our kids are deeply affected by it, and they're not functioning very well. And most of us probably know that anything more than 2 hours on a screen can drive depression and anxiety, attention problems, even suicidal ideation. And by definition, every kid is in front of a screen for far more than 2 hours every single day. So there is reason to be concerned. Our kids need grace, they need breaks, they need a bunch of things from us. So I was talking with my son about my talk, and he said, okay, now you're giving these people kind of what I would call a steaming load of bad news. Give them something to work with. What can they do about all of this? So I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes just going over briefly what it is I think you can do to mitigate some of these difficulties that our kids are running into. We're all familiar with the airplane bit because we've all flown, not in the last year probably, but we've all flown in the past. And you hear the bit about the oxygen masks coming down, and you put your mask on first so you are available to put your child's mask on. It's a little counterintuitive, hard for a lot of us, but I think theoretically we get it, right? The same is true here. Nothing is more important than these people. And I know some of you, that you people take care of yourself. So I want you to make sure that you have someone to talk to on a fairly regular basis, whether that be a spouse, a friend, a sibling, a parent, a life coach, or a therapist, somebody you can talk to talk about your fears, your frustrations with your family that you're spending way too much time with, your sadness, your depression, your anxiety, all the stuff that you're going through. It's important. You're never going to be able to help these kids very effectively if you are not pretty solid. You don't have to be 1,000%, but pretty solid. We all know that we spend too much time looking at news and social media. So I'm going to say the obvious. Please take several breaks from those every single day, because those will eat us alive. I also want you to keep hope alive. I think we all know that sometimes it takes a crisis or a period of crisis in order for positive change to take place. So though a pandemic and social unrest is awful in so many demonstrative ways, they also might drive positive change. Our kids need some hope from us, and we need to have that hope. We can't just give them false hope. They're too smart, they're too discerning. They're going to figure out that we're just posing for them. So it's really important that we keep that alive. And for you guys, I want you to keep the option of therapy open. I've been accused of saying therapy is the answer to all the things. I don't think it's the answer to all the things, but I do think it's the answer to some. I'm gonna steal the last couple of minutes here, Jordan, if I still have a couple, and offer a couple other quick tips here. I want you to consider the vibe in your home, your office, whatever setting it is that you're around young people. These places become sanctuary for our kids now more than ever. And we don't always attend to whether it's loud and cluttered in here, whether it's dead silent in here, what kind of vibe are we creating? Create a vibe in your space that works for you, that makes you feel comfortable. You're spending a lot of time in that space. So create, and like this space here, I had to work on this to feel pretty good about it, but I feel pretty good about it. So I feel comfortable sitting and talking with you guys. This is really, really important now more than ever. When I started talking about this, I had no idea how important it was going to be. For a moment, consider the vibe the kids get from you. A lot of us have lost sight of this. And so we're not calibrating very well. What do kids get from me? Are they getting the best of me? Are they getting that unconditional positive regard where I light up for them on the worst day, when they have not done their work, when they're not participating in their therapy, when they have violated the law, when they're not wearing their masks, whatever it is, on the worst day, they need to know that this group of people that I'm talking to, this PLT, this team is with them. That, you know, like, I got you, you and I, we're good. There might be 500 things I need you to change, but fundamentally at the core, I got you, I like you, and you've got me to lean on the worst day. That whole idea that we learned in seminars or in graduate school about unconditional positive regard applies really, really powerfully in this moment. As a quick side note, some of you might know kids who suggest they're thriving during the pandemic. You know, like, I have social anxiety, but nothing's happening. People aren't getting together. I'm bullied at school, but there's no school, or it's very contained, so I'm not worried about that. I strongly urge you not to let kids get too acclimated to that thinking, because I think on the back end of all of this, when things go back to reasonably normal, this is going to be very, very difficult to undo, just as a side note. Another couple quick points, and then I'll let us go, because I know you guys have a busy day in front of you. There is nothing that will keep a child off of my therapy couch across the hall more than movement. And I know in a pandemic, it's very hard to get kids moving. And I've noticed just in my Zoom calls with kids that in March and April of May of 2020, they were up in the camera like I am now and paying attention and, following every like idea that I had. And now they're kind of like in bed, half asleep, lethargic, looking away, looking at another screen. And so I want kids moving every single day. And we've got to get creative about that because we all know that sweating and moving, walking the dog, taking the jog, doing the Peloton bike, whatever it is, that aligns mind, body, and spirit in a way that nothing else does. It's a bit of sanctuary and it gives kids agency over parts of their lives when they feel very little agency over any of it. So to the extent that you can participate in getting kids moving, let's absolutely do that. And finally, the last thing I'm going to urge you to do is to create space to listen to kids enough to say the thing they need to say. And most of us have been the recipient of the thing. I'm not smart. I'm stupid. I'm fat. I'm ugly. People don't like me. I don't like myself. I'm just not good enough. That kind of thing. And I think we all know when kids come to us with those thoughts, all they need is a place to park them. They don't need them solved. Sometimes they're fleeting. But if they say, I left it with my social worker or with my teacher or with my administrator, and they didn't blow up, I feel safer. Things are going to be okay. Be the recipient of the thing, hold the thing, because we know that if we don't take it, the thing, they're going to go to another kid. And, I've been practicing for 25 years. I still feel over my skis sometimes when I'm working with young people. So if we can be the people who hold the thing and don't try to talk them out of it. No, you're smart, you're beautiful, you're awesome. If people don't want to hang out with you, that's their problem. Then we're saying we can't handle the thing and they've got to go somewhere else. The better story is always that we be the ones to hold the thing for them. I hope that makes some sense. And as just kind of a concluding note, I want you guys to remember that this is hard. This time period is hard. I want you to be gentle and easy with yourselves. Take lots of breaks. You are not going to be perfect at any of this because you're working with stressed human beings while you are a stressed human being. We are, again, all idling on high. So be kind and gentle with yourselves. And I think we all recognize, but I'll just remind us that this is hard for our kids too. They've never been through a pandemic before either. And so let's all decide we're going to take this thing pass fail, right? We're not going to be perfect. There are going to be problems. We're going to lose our temper sometimes. We're going to say something we regret sometimes. That's okay. I know enough of you to know that you know the lane you need to be in with kids in order to stay connected to them. And as long as they know you're with them and they have your unconditional positive regard, that's everything right now. So be gentle with yourself and kind with yourself. Be gentle and kind with these kids, and things are going to work out just fine. And thank you so much. I so appreciate you protecting a half an hour to spend with me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duffy. That was a lot. I know when people are so passionate about the topics that they're talking about, it's very difficult to fit everything in a short amount of time. So I thought you did a great job. I appreciate it. We do have a few minutes, about 10 minutes, if you can spare it, Dr. Duffy, for some questions. If
Are you kidding? Absolutely. Let's go.
And I see some in the chat. So anybody feel free to speak up. Otherwise, you can throw it in the chat and I can read those. And I actually had a question too, and maybe it will get some people going. You said in the very beginning that kids aren't prepared today for everything that gets thrown at them. So our group kind of comes from a place of high level change, policy level change. Even on the individual level, what could maybe schools do or parents do to help kids prepare without stressing them out more, bringing things up to say, hey, be prepared for this, but giving them those social skills to be able to deal with things better?
Yeah, so I think the best way globally to do that, Jordan, is there are, I'm not the only parenting expert out there. There are some brilliant people out there in this field. And to the extent that you can even have a virtual assembly, or hopefully one day an in-person assembly, to talk to kids in much the way I'm talking to you now, and recognizing that, hey, you guys are dealing with a much different world. So your self-care is really, really important. And if the message coming down from school boards and administrators and everybody who's on this call is, we recognize that things have changed. We recognize that you guys are stressed, and we are going to emphasize the importance of your self-care here. That is going to be all but part of the curriculum. And if it were up to this particular clinician, it would be fundamentally a part of a curriculum, but that's maybe a discussion for a different time. But at the very least, to present them with some of these ideas and solutions for managing their own stress and anxiety, I think this is going to become a more and more important thing as time goes on. I would have said this pre-pandemic, but now, with so many kids seeking therapy, most good therapists, their practices are full to the brim. So the luxury that the pandemic has provided us, and there aren't many of them, is that a lot of the taboo we've been fighting around mental illness and mental wellness, I don't know if we're fighting that as hard as we used to be. So I'm inclined to take advantage of the idea that this is therapy, and going to talk to the school social worker, the school psychologist, your counselor, that this stuff is more and more normalized as things go on. So to the degree to which that we can encourage this in our kids, even now, I think if we were talking in April, Jordan, I probably would have said, yeah, I don't know if this Zoom call kind of therapy thing is going to work on any level. The level I work at it, the level a school social worker does, or even, in a casual way, a teacher does, or an administrator. But that's wrong. This actually can be very effective. And a lot of kids who wouldn't pursue any kind of help whatsoever, there's something about the safety of being once removed, being a one dimension on this camera removed from sitting in the room with somebody, might make us a little more approachable than we would be otherwise. So let's encourage our kids to seek the help they need, keep that taboo out of their lives, so that one-on-one they're seeking help, but also collectively, to the extent that we can integrate into our days with our kids a little bit of, hey, I want you to move today. Hey, I want you to really tend to self-care today. I want you to download the Calm app or the Headspace app and do 10 minutes where you're just calm and away from everything else, so that you remember what it's like to be in sanctuary and to breathe and to take care of yourself. Because I think we all know our kids aren't going to learn much. They're not going to integrate much if they don't have the self-care piece down.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a couple more questions coming in through the chat. Do you see teens mirroring unhealthy behavior they see their parents do to cope, or do you find that their coping mechanisms are completely separate from parent behavior?
No, it's a great question. I absolutely see teens mirror a lot of what their parents do to cope or not to cope. I have worked with, and I'm sure some of you have, the parents who say, you cannot smoke, you cannot vape, you cannot juul, you cannot drink alcohol, you cannot take Xanax, you cannot take Adderall, and meanwhile, while they're mixing a drink. So I think we have to be really, really conscious of the messages that we are sending our kids through our actions and our behaviors. That's why I really talk a lot about self-care, because we're modeling all the time, and our kids might not say so. Most teenagers will never say so, but they're watching, they're paying attention, they're following our model. So if we create calm and cool and emotional self-regulation, our kids will follow suit. If we lose it at every turn, if we are alarmists about about grades, about our kids going out and not just problem solving, our kids are going to follow suit. So the power we have is the power of our model. And I think everybody here on this call is modeling for the kids that we are connected with on a day-to-day basis. And all of us as parents are also connected with kids on a day-to-day basis. And our model means a lot. So sometimes kids will go off the page and do something independently that we need to work with them on. But by and large, our model is what they're following. So it's going to speak way, way more than any lecture we could possibly ever give them.
And I have two more quick questions in the chat. Do you have any suggestions on how to increase motivation in teens or how parents can help motivate their kids?
Yeah, this is maybe the biggest question I get on a regular basis. You know, my child's just not motivated. And a lot of kids will tell me, you know, either e-learning or the mixed schedule or whatever doesn't work for them. It's really hard for them to get motivated. And what we are inclined to do, especially as parents, I think, is to say, well, you have to do it anyway. And that's a reasonable thing to do. It's true. But what we fail to do in between is acknowledge, like, yeah, this is really hard. You know, like, I get it. Like, and show me what this is like. To the extent that you can step into your child's world or the child's world that you're working with and say, you know, like, tell me what the hard part is. What's the hardest part for you? And let's see if we can break it down into something that's more manageable. Because we all know that kids tend to, when they get anxious, they tend to catastrophize. Things get big, they get overwhelmed, and they might think like, I've got so much to do this week, I'm not going to be able to get any of it done. And a lot of kids will step all the way back and opt out altogether. Whereas if they had a caring adult who was listening to them, who said, okay, I get it. Yeah, there is a lot to do, but let's break it down. Let's look at the pieces, you know? And again, we're modeling, we're trying to show them, like, you know, how to manage a workload in real time. So to the extent that you can be present with them and hear them out. And that's the hard part, you know, like, think about any argument, if for those of you who are married, that you have with a spouse. If your point of view isn't acknowledged and validated, then it's just war. Then it's just an argument and you're not going to get anywhere, and you kind of know it. You just want to win the argument. And this is true of kids as well. You know, they will create an argument or some other deflection and not talk about their work. And the way to get them motivated and talking about their work is to make it manageable, because a lot of kids feel overwhelmed and feel like, I cannot get there. So we have to acknowledge, yeah, this might not be working for you. This probably is overwhelming. Let's break it way down and let's think about the setting. Like I was talking about the vibe at home, the vibe your child gets from you. Let's work in this really calm space. If you need music on really quietly with no lyrics, in my opinion. If we need to make cookies halfway through, just to take a break. If you need to take a jog, walk the dog, let's create these breaks, because it's probably not healthy for you to be staring at the screen trying to figure this out hour after hour after hour. So get into their world, understand what it is that's demotivating for them, and be patient, because they don't always know. They have to kind of figure that out as they go. So listen, do a lot of listening, and keep your own anxiety low, because they can barely handle their own when they're unmotivated. And if you add yours on top of it, then you've got a situation that is all but untenable.
That's a great reminder for us as adults, I think, too, just to kind of break things apart and do it piece by piece. I think we're all, you know, overworked and stressed right now with everything going on. So it's a great reminder for us as well. And lastly, this question, they've heard a different speaker talk about same things that you're mentioning. And research shows kids are very resilient. So once pandemic ceases, much of the mental stress we're seeing will dissipate. Do you agree with this, or do you think there will have more of a lasting ripple effect on kids?
No, I agree with that. I think that kids are incredibly resilient. The problem is they don't know they are. When I described Tim earlier in this talk, This is a really, really potent, strong, resilient, intelligent kid with every tool at his disposal. And yet, you'll remember I pointed out he smokes weed every day. And a lot of you probably know kids who lean on something, whether it is a substance or a video game or Snapchat. Kids don't know the degree to which they're resilient. They are incredibly resilient. I'm blown away. I think I've known over the years 500 kids, and there's not one where I thought, I don't think this kid's going to be okay. I don't think this kid's got what it takes to be resilient. They all absolutely do. They need to be reminded of that. And one way to do that in kind of a gentle way without being cloying or making them think you're not being entirely honest with them is to give them a challenge, okay, so break down your work for today. Let's see how it goes. And let's talk at the end of the day. And instead of doing for them, which so many of us are inclined to do, we let them do the work. We are available to them as allies and guides and consultants, but not doers. They're the ones that do the work. And at the end of the day, it gives us the luxury of saying, you know what? You are super competent. You are super resilient. Look what you got done today. And I always look at the goals for all of us to develop competence and resilience. And that doesn't come from us doing for them. And especially during this pandemic, I'm working with an awful lot of parents who are doing for their kids. And that is a show of enormous no confidence. And if you want to see resilience drip away from a kid really quickly, that is a way to do it. But no, I actually agree, Jory, that kids are very resilient. They just need to be reminded of that pretty frequently.
Great. Thank you. Well, this was great. I wish we had another full hour to spend with you because I could ask you a million questions, but I want to remind everybody that Dr. Duffy is speaking 2 more times today. So there's 2 more opportunities to see him. If you visit glenbardparentseries.org, you can get more information, but he'll be doing a noon presentation directed towards professionals and a 7 o'clock evening presentation tonight directed towards parents. So there's lots of opportunities to see you. And I thank you so much for doing a third talk for us, kicking it off today.
So happy to. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.